Hey everybody, Greg Pruett here, President of the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance, and I am joined today by Alexandria Kincaid, our attorney, who has graciously agreed to help us kind of shoot a video explaining Senate Bill 1004, the Stand Your Ground expansion bill that we are working on here in the state of Idaho. That bill is being sponsored by State Senator Scott Herndon. And so, we've been doing this for a very long time, and I think we seem to be in the constitutional carry portion of the fight, where it's a newer concept, but it's not a brand new concept. Other states have similar aspects of this or the exact same thing, and so when we're down at the legislature talking to people about the bill, there's some like, what exactly are we doing here, and citizens asking what exactly it does. And so I guess maybe to start, if you can just give a brief rundown legally of what protections this provides for gun owners or whoever else in the bill.
Right. And I think you're spot on, Greg, that this is something that it's very reminiscent of the days when we were trying to push constitutional carry and people had kind of heard of it, but they weren't sure.
Yeah.
And it's been a long battle because you've been pushing something like this through the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance for years now, and it's gotten absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
But this is something that was passed in Florida in the early 2000s. So we're talking 2004, 2005, when Florida first said, you know what? If somebody is charged with homicide, they deserve an opportunity to avoid a trial ahead of the trial. Okay?
Yeah.
And so this is something that is a procedural issue in the course of a prosecution. It is something that would afford an innocent person an opportunity to recuperate financially, a la Zimmerman or Rittenhouse. If you're wrongfully prosecuted and a jury decides that your actions were lawful and you should not have been prosecuted, you shouldn't be the one that's holding the bag financially on that. We want the government to reimburse. But we also want a second shot before you go to trial to allow an innocent person to actually put on what's called a prima facie case that says, hey, I meet the requirements of Idaho's justifiable homicide statute. This person pulled their gun on me. I shot in self-defense. I shouldn't have to go through a trial. I shouldn't be prosecuted. And at that point, the prosecution would have to come in and show by clear and convincing evidence to a judge at a hearing just on this issue that you actually did not act in accordance with Idaho law. And if they can't make that proof to a judge, then their case is done. It's dismissed. You don't have to go forward with the trial. So, our whole criminal justice system in this country is based on innocent until proven guilty. You should have this opportunity to prove your innocence before you're financially ruined, or your reputation is ruined, or you've lost your family, or whatever else could ensue. And if you look at the two prominent cases that we've seen nationally, and again, I'm going to refer to Zimmerman and Rittenhouse, how many other people have been prosecuted and put through this and lost their lives, both financially and emotionally, before they're found not guilty?
Yeah.
And that's all we're asking here, is that we give the true victim one more opportunity before they have to endure that lengthy trial process.
Yeah, and it's interesting because some of the opposition to doing this is like, well, the government this and the government that, and we're going to make the job harder on the government, and we're kind of like, well, yeah, because again, this is not just you're not being accused of stealing some candy from the store.
Right.
You have killed someone, and I don't know about you, I don't want to kill anybody. Like, even if a bad person, I have no desire to do that. If I have to defend myself, I will. But emotionally and financially, I mean, it's devastating, and hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to try and defend yourself in the most serious situation. And as we've seen, there are people like Rittenhouse who are prosecuted that there was no evidence, at all. There was video evidence that showed very clearly he acted appropriately and actually did really well for a 17-year-old kid. But like you said, how many other people potentially in Idaho, and that's another thing, well, has this happened in Idaho? I don't know, maybe.
Do we want to wait?
No, I don't want to wait.
Because in Florida, in one of the big cases that they had there before the legislature finally took action and got this right procedurally, The AG's office actually argued in one of those cases that the legislator had 4 separate opportunities because folks like you had gone before and wanted this procedure in place and they refused to do it.
Yeah.
And so here comes the prosecution arguing, hey, the legislature could have acted and could have created this protection. They chose not to.
Yeah.
They argue that in court. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for an innocent person to defend themselves. You're up against the government. They have the resources of the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've heard some of these arguments. I've heard about, why do they have to try their case twice? Couple things on that. If they can't prove it by clear and convincing evidence, how are they ever going to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, if they quit arresting innocent people, they're not going to have to try it once.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and that's and we've honestly told the legislature that a lot of this is somewhat preventative, right? We're hoping that this will prevent bad prosecutors from taking innocent people to jail for political purposes, and I think it will serve as a good deterrent. And I know so one of the things that especially on a quote unquote newer concept, or a concept that maybe every state hasn't adopted, is how is it working in other states, right? That was, again, the constitutional carryout. Well, how's it working in these other states, right?
Right. Because law enforcement was worried about constitutional carry.
Correct.
We're talking about legal citizens carrying guns. What are we worried about? It's working fine. It's a deterrent to the criminals.
Correct.
And the same thing, I've spoken with some of my colleagues who are in the criminal defense business in Florida, and how is it working there? They don't know of a single instance where the state should have been able to try a true criminal and the case was thrown out at an immunity hearing.
Yeah.
There have been instances, they've reported to me, where somebody should have been granted immunity and wound up having to go through a trial. But the bottom line is, if we could trust the government to do the right thing, if we could trust our prosecutors and we could trust all the judges, and granted there are very, very many good ones out there who truly are going after the real criminals, but we obviously can't trust all of them to do the right thing, and we've seen that on a national scale, and that's why we need this protection in Idaho before something happens.
Well, and policing and prosecuting and judicial decisions are changing rapidly, and they're not changing in a good way. Right, we're seeing more and more gun owners being targeted across the country because the Second Amendment is it, right? Their leftist agenda is all based on the Second Amendment has to go eventually.
Correct.
And so in a state like Idaho, this shouldn't be that difficult. Like, hey, we're protecting gun owners or anybody. But it doesn't even have to be a gun. It could be any weapon that you use to defend yourself. We're trying to defend innocent Idaho people from being, prosecuted politically, especially. And I think this is a good deterrent for that.
Well, and that's just it. The ISAA is a target. You're a target. I'm a target. I support the Second Amendment. Gun owners are targets. And they're not going to be able to fully realize their political agenda unless and until they get rid of our guns. And every gun owner they can take the guns away from is a score on their side.
Yeah. So one of the, I guess, let's jump real quick to the compensation portion. Can you explain how that would work and how that's determined?
Correct. So if somebody if an innocent person is prosecuted and found not guilty at trial, the jury is going to be presented with a special question. And the special question is, was this person not guilty for using justifiable force under Idaho law? We're not changing that. We still have the same statute that describes what it is to use justifiable force in defense of yourself or another person. And if the jury says yes, now guess what? The government gets to pay your expenses related to that trial.
Yeah, and that's we knew going in this was going to be a sticking point, because right now the way we have the bill, it says that the county where this person was prosecuted is gonna foot the bill for it. And so some of the concern, obviously, from government officials is like, well, that'll be a killer on our budget. And we're like, well, sure, then don't prosecute people who you don't have the evidence that they committed some sort of crime.
Correct.
There's no concern after that.
That is correct. And this is the only instance that I'm aware of in our entire criminal justice system where the government goes after the true victim.
Yeah.
We're prosecuting the victims here. They had to use self-defense. Nobody wants to. Nobody wants to take someone else's life. You're forced to do that. You're the victim.
Yeah.
You know, why are we prosecuting these people?
Yeah. Well, and that's there's that, and then we'll get along the same lines of, well, if somebody's found not guilty, why can't they just file a bad prosecutorial misconduct suit or file this lawsuit? And I'm like, they just went through the most devastating trial they're ever going to go through. They don't have the money to do that.
Well, if you've ever been through a trial, you don't ever want to be through another one ordinarily, because it is stress, it is years, it is a lot of drama, and it's just something that any normal person wouldn't want in their life. You don't want to pursue a lawsuit. It doesn't feel good to file a lawsuit against someone, not for a normal person. Granted, there's maybe some revenge situations there if the government put you through that, but still, there's another couple years out of your life to pursue something and to prove something when all of the evidence is sitting right before a jury who just found you not guilty. And the only question is, why were you not guilty? And if you were not guilty because you used justifiable force, then let's just get this piece done and move on.
Yeah, and there is the concern from some people on what if a bad guy games the system and they still find him not guilty? But I think that's where that question comes in and is really important, because maybe the prosecution made some mistakes or the police made some mistakes, and it's maybe clear to them that he is not guilty, but the self-defense was a big question, right, because of some mistakes. And the jury can say, no, it wasn't because of self-defense.
Correct. And remember, again, I go back to what is the basic underlying premise of our entire criminal justice system? It is that you're innocent until proven guilty, and that it is better that a guilty person goes free than that an innocent person is prosecuted. And so this extra procedure would allow one more opportunity for an innocent person to prove their innocence ahead of a jury trial and escape that entire lengthy process. And that's what we want. If somebody and granted, I was a prosecutor for years. It can be devastating when you really do have a good case, but maybe your victim is a drug addict, or there's some other factual piece of evidence in your case that makes a jury just not want to find the person guilty. That, granted, that happens too, and it feels bad. We certainly don't want to create a law where murderers are just running free and law enforcement doesn't arrest anybody, but that's not what's happening in Florida, where, again, they've had this law and they've built upon it since 2005.
Yeah,
it's not madness and mayhem because we're affording innocent people an opportunity to have a hearing before they have a jury trial.
Yeah. I just hear constitutional carry, madness and mayhem, right?
Well, that's where I got it, right? That's what it was going to be. It was going to be people running all over the place with guns, shooting everybody, and law enforcement wouldn't be able to control the situation, which obviously, how long have we had constitutional carry now? It's been a while.
2016.
2016. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But clearly, all those fears did not become reality. Because again, having guns in the hands of law-abiding citizens is always a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think maybe closing here, what you mentioned is important, is that we're not changing the justifiable homicide statute or anything, right? We're not changing the laws in that regard. We're just saying here's a procedural issue that we can do to add that protection.
Here's an extra hearing we're affording innocent people in order to avoid financial ruin, and if they don't get the opportunity to avoid that jury trial based on that hearing, then if they're found not guilty, here's one more opportunity for them to avoid financial ruin, at least with the reimbursement clause.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too, I think, is that when, especially with a homicide or something like that, there's a much higher probability. Maybe you may get a prosecutor who pushes you. Okay, you're not going to go for murder one, but why don't you agree to do this instead? Knowing that you have to go through a trial, and what risks are you willing to take? Do you take the deal and take some sort of lesser charge, or do you take your chances on the murder at trial? And now they can say, hey, I'm innocent, and I really want to see what proof you have that I did something wrong before we do this insanity.
Correct.
To me, I think that's huge.
Right.
So, yeah.
It's a good bill. I hope your people can work some magic, and I hope our politicians can open their minds and be receptive to what this bill is actually doing, and not pay attention to the things that are inaccurate and being spewed about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And, I'm not an attorney, so if you guys want an attorney, there you go. We got a good one who actually understands all the gun laws. So thank you guys for watching. Please be sure to share the video. And if you have any questions about SB 1004, let us know in the comments, and we'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thanks.